Our opening thought comes from the Reverend Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers, from his Dartmouth commencement address from 2002. When I say it's you I like, I'm talking about that part of you that knows that life is far more than anything you can ever see or hear or touch. That deep part of you that allows you to stand for those things without which humankind cannot survive. Love that conquers hate, peace that rises triumphant over war, and justice that proves more powerful than greed. Our next reading comes from Thich Nhat Hanh, The Heart of the Buddha's Teaching, Transforming Suffering into Peace, Joy, and Liberation. Thich Nhat Hanh writes, "Letting go gives us freedom, and freedom is the only condition for happiness. If in our heart we still cling to anything, anger, anxiety, or possessions, we cannot be free." Our next reading is from Wendell Berry, The Peace of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free. The title of my discourse this morning is Swords into Plowshares, that poetic phrase from the Hebrew Bible that looks at the vision of moving away from war to ways of peace with each other. Another title for the discourse could be Love, Not Hate. Looking at the question, how can we work for peace in times of war without losing sight of the importance of establishing justice? My thoughts today are in many ways my reflections over the past number of weeks as we've experienced the war and violence in Israel and Palestine, but also in a number of other parts of the world. And in fact, almost at all times, we are experiencing some form of violence or war in the world in these days and times. If we want to eliminate violence, it's not enough to say that we want peace. It's not enough to say that we pray for peace. We have to be committed to eliminating the systems and the conditions within our societies that create human deprivation and human desperation, that perpetuate injustice and that treat some groups of persons as less than other groups of persons. Peace must not be conflated with an unjust order that perpetuates the interests of the powerful over those who are the most vulnerable in our societies. As Martin Luther King Jr. reminds us, true peace is not merely the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice. We will not gain true peace without overcoming the evils of racism, greed, and militarism. There are persons who are absolute and thoroughgoing pacifists who are often critical of the concept of a just war. Because for an absolute pacifist, the use of all military force and violence is considered morally wrong. But I don't think that we should dismiss the criteria of just war theory too quickly when we look at whether we should ever use military force in a very complex, unjust, and violent world. So often those who use just war theory to justify war and violence do so, however, by simply cherry-picking the criteria that they want and by ignoring the criteria that would question the validity of the war they want to wage. If we actually took all of the criteria of just war seriously, and I'm not going to go through all the different criteria of just war theory, you can thank me now. But if we took all of the criteria of just war theory seriously, and there are many, there would actually be very few wars that we could justify based on just war theory and its criteria. Unfortunately, there may be times when the use of military force may be necessary for self-defense or for the defense of innocent and vulnerable persons, but those times are much fewer and far between than many would imagine. One need not be an absolute or thoroughgoing pacifist to reject the violence that we see in the world today. One need not be a pacifist to reject the use of violence by Hamas and by Israel. The actions of neither Hamas nor Israel can be justified by a thorough application of just war criteria. Nothing in just war theory allows for the torture and killing of innocent civilians, and nothing in just war theory justifies a collective punishment that kills thousands of innocent persons as a response. The murderous violence that is happening right now in Palestine and Israel is being fueled by hate. And hate has very little to do with justice and nothing to do with reconciliation. Hate is a consuming fire. Hate dehumanizes. Hate depersonalizes. It will lead to nothing but more hate and more death. Hate is not the way out of this hell of our own creation. Love and justice are the only way out. But it seems so difficult, almost impossible, to move from the hate and violence of this world to a more loving, just, and peaceful present and future. But we must remind ourselves that love is not powerless. Love is not powerless in the face of hate. There have been times in the past when love overcame hate, and there can be times in the present and in the future when the power of love can and will overcome hate again. Love has a way of being resilient. It has a way of not dying even when others think that they have killed it dead. Most of the problems and the conflicts in the world that we are facing now are caused by greed. Greed for power, greed for money. And those who have greed for power and money use force and fear to hold on to their power and their wealth. Insofar as hate keeps the rest of us divided, distressed, and distracted, hate becomes a tool for those in power to maintain and expand their power. If we can finally recognize that our hatred for one another benefits no one but the powerful, then the power of love of the people might actually have the ability to rise up and be actualized in beloved community. And the love we need for today is not only love for our human siblings, but also a love for the whole earth and all of the life therein. We will never be able to fully love and be at peace with one another unless we also fully love and be at peace with the earth and all of the life on earth. As I've been reflecting on the war and violence in our world, I could not help but think that Yoko Ono and John Lennon were on to something with the imagine no religion idea, at least based on religion's track record up to the present moment. When religion is used to differentiate, devalue, and divide members of the human community rather than lifting up our common humanity, religion is a problem. This is one of the reasons I am personally much more interested in following the way of Jesus, the one who said, "Blessed are the peacemakers," than I am in identifying with the Christian religion, a religion that compromised with empire and has so often embraced the use of war and violence to further its interests. Last night I listened to another song that was written by John Lennon and was performed together by the members of the Beatles in various ways over a period of many years. They recorded a song, maybe you've heard it, Now and Then. Just came out, I guess, a few days ago. And there's a video that's already has a number of millions of hits, as you would imagine a new Beatles song would have. It's a good song. Not the best Beatles song out there, but it is a very good song. But as I was listening to it, for the first time, I was overcome by a memory from 1990, when I was a student at a place called the Bosse Ecumenical Institute of the World Council of Churches, next to a little village called Saligny, Switzerland, where I was one of 51 students from 33 countries from all over the world. We were there from 1990, the fall of 1990 through the spring of 1991. It was when I was in seminary. During that time, you may recall that we were in the lead up to a war with Iraq over their invasion of Kuwait. You can imagine that a place like Geneva took center stage, and it did during that time, during the buildup and to the actual point where war happened between the United States and others and Iraq. And that was a very difficult time in many ways for the students who were there, reflecting on that, and there were different views about it and different opinions, and there were arguments about it. It was a difficult subject within our community. But one night, we were all gathered after dinner. We had common meals every lunch, every breakfast, every lunch, every dinner. We had common prayer in the morning and common prayer in the evening. We spent a lot of time together. Some might say too much time together. But one night after dinner, we were gathered together, and One of the students who was from Germany, his name is Klaus, one of my good friends at the Institute, he was a big Beatles fan. And all of a sudden, he put into the stereo system the greatest hits of the Beatles. And there were dozens of us still there after dinner, spending time together. And when the song started to play over the stereo system, just wow. Just wow. Dozens of us all together began to sing and dance together. At the top of our lungs, we were singing. The dancing was perhaps the most joyous dancing, the most exuberant dancing I've ever witnessed in my life. Dance styles from almost every continent on the world except Australia and Antarctica. Sorry, Antarctica. We sang and danced for hours to those Beatles songs. We kept on playing it over and over again. We were Africans, Asians, Europeans, North Americans, South Americans. We were all one humanity. And I remember tears in my eyes as I experienced this gift of exuberant joy. And as I was listening to Now and Then last night and recalling that, how I wish the whole world could experience such joy in beloved community. The world has everything to gain from humanity living together in peace, and everything to lose if we don't. The ongoing challenge for us all is this: how do we cultivate the courage to love each other and to be peacemakers in a world that seems so overcome by hate and violence? I don't know the answer. None of us knows exactly what the answer is, but I do believe it begins with loving each other where we are, doing all we can to work for peace with justice in our own communities, and somehow not succumbing to the consuming fire of hate in our world. Then perhaps someday we might all be able to dance and sing together as one in exuberant joy, or at the very least, stop waging war against each other. Our parting thought comes from Black Elk Speaks, as told through John G. Nehart. The first piece, which is the most important, is that which comes within the souls of people when they realize their relationship, their oneness with the universe and all its powers, and when they realize at the center of the universe dwells the Great Spirit, and that its center is really everywhere. It is within each of us.